Appreciate you joining me once again. I hope you're having a good day. We're going to be looking at the account of when Moses strikes the rock the second time. Today's hymn is a hymn I am not familiar with. It is the hymn, not that, My God, my Father, though I stray.
My God, my Father, though I stray far from my home on life's rough way, oh, teach me from my heart to say, Thy will be done.
I'd like to look at the other verses from this hymn, just in case you're not familiar with it, as said I'm not. Verse 2, Though dark my path and sad my lot, let me be still and murmur not, or breathe the prayer divinely taught, Thy will be done. Renew my will from day to day, blend it with thine, and take away all that now makes it hard to say, Thy will be done. Then, when on earth I breathe no more, the prayer oft mixed with tears before, I'll sing upon a happier shore, Thy will be done. My God, my Father, though I stray. The account is found in Numbers 20. Beginning in verse 1, Then the children of Israel, the whole congregation, came into the wilderness of Zin in the first month, and the people stayed in Kadesh. And Miriam died there and was buried there. Now there was no water for the congregation, and so they gathered together against Moses and Aaron. And the people contended with Moses and spoke, saying, If only we had died when our brethren died before the Lord. Just amazing, isn't it? To read on a little further. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Take the rod, you and your brother Aaron, and gather the congregation together, speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will yield its water. Thus you shall bring water for them out of the rock, and give drink to the congregation and their animals. So Moses took the rod from before the Lord, as he commanded him. And Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, Hear now, you rebels, must we bring water for you out of this rock? And then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their animals drank. And then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, Because you did not believe me to hallow me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them. What points might we make? One is a reminder that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Moses is the most humble man on the face of the earth. And yet for this moment in time, when it's written about it elsewhere that he spoke hastily with his lips, and he sins. He does not hallow the Lord in the eyes of the congregation. And we recognize that even Moses was looking forward to the Messiah. God will raise up a prophet like me. Talking about the Messiah, speaking earlier on. Moses sinned. Moses was a sinner. All have sinned, come short of the glory of God, and that's why we need Jesus. And Moses needed Jesus. And this is one of the accounts that illustrates that. I wonder if the devil, one of the things the devil does, and we see it in the account of the temptation of Jesus, when it says that the devil left for an opportune time. And that is what the devil is looking for. The devil looks for those opportune times. And I wonder if he did not do that in this account. And that's why I read verse 1. Miriam, Moses' sister, has just died. She was buried. And then the congregation gathers against Moses and Aaron, the brothers of Miriam. And it's just unbelievable that they would do this right after Miriam passes, but that's what happened. The devil looks for an opportune time when we are going through some sort of struggle or trial. And the devil loves to, when it rains, it pours. And he loves to pour. Might consider that idea, thinking of Job. And when Job, all those things that had happened to Job, as far as prosperity, as far as family, as far as his health. But perhaps one of the most cruel twists of the knife had to be when his own wife said, "Why do you hold your integrity? Curse God and die." Job rebukes her. He didn't need that. And I wonder if here, as we think about, if this doesn't, we might at least consider it. That when we are going through some sort of struggle and we're having trouble, that's when the devil attacks. And so we need to be aware of that and be ready for it. And ultimately, I think what it's all said and done, one of the questions that I've always wondered about, and there's no definitive answer, I suppose. This is the second account of the water coming from the rock. In the first account, the Lord tells Moses to strike the rock, and Moses strikes the rock. And my question is, why did the Lord not tell him to strike it this time? Why does he tell him to speak to it? You might meditate on that and perhaps have some good ideas. But I will say this, I think it's interesting in the account that as the congregation is once again murmuring and complaining, the Lord does not immediately come down on them. He simply states, as they complain, you would think in between verse 5 and verse 6, you would think the Lord would say, enough. But he doesn't. They complain. The glory of the Lord appears to Moses and Aaron, and the Lord says to Moses, speak to the rock. And thus you shall bring water out of the rock. I'll say, I think what we see is, as much as all these things have been a test for the people, here we see a test for Moses and Aaron. And sadly, they disobey God. Moses disobeys. And we might notice, verse 12, the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe me, to hallow me in their eyes. The end of chapter 20, the end of this chapter, and I suppose I can move it down a little bit to show you. This is when Moses, of course, is told, you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I give them. Let me see something very quickly. You might notice the King James, ye shall not bring. I believe that's plural. And sure enough, at the end of this chapter, we have Moses' other sibling dying. Aaron will die. And we know what's coming. It was a test. The test. Have you ever thought about the fact, all the years before this, 40 years before this, nope, not 40 years. Let me do the math real quick. Some 120 years. Roughly, give or take. Don't do math on the fly. When a young girl named Miriam watched what would happen to her baby brother, and he was drawn out of the water. And some 40 years before this, when Moses was so reluctant to go to Egypt, And the Lord says, here comes your brother. It is a sadness that neither Miriam nor Moses nor Aaron entered the promised land. Now, does that mean that they're lost eternally? Not by any stretch of the imagination. There's a big difference between that little land on the west side of the Jordan River and heaven. And Moses is one of those few characters where we can say definitively that he is saved. Because when the Lord, before his departure, the Lord takes Peter, James, and John and goes up on the mountain, and Peter, James, and John fall asleep due to sorrow. I believe, I can't remember if it's that account or the garden account where it says they slept out of sorrow, but anyway, they slept. And when they woke up, they saw Jesus speaking with two individuals, Elijah and Moses, speaking about his upcoming departure. And so we have that comfort, and that is the ultimate comfort, by the way. But still, as we read the account in Numbers, it is a sorrow. And Moses was sorrowful. And Moses is going to plead with God to please let him enter into the promised land. And the Lord's not going to do it. He did not hallow God in the eyes of Israel for a moment. And there are consequences for sin. And so we need to be very careful. We need to be very careful, but we also need to be thankful for Jesus, because he came to save sinners. Appreciate you. Hope you have a good day. Join us tomorrow for another portion of our daily praise.